Can you start, Veronica?
I think, yes, we can start.
Okay. Okay. On behalf of the Southern California section of the American Chemical Society, CALAX, I am Dr. Krishna Kaluri, alternate counselor of CALAX, and I am a National Senior Chemist Committee member, also Executive Committee member. And in both capacities, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's event. And I will pass over to Professor Jessica Liu of Biola University, located in La Mirada, and she will be introducing today's speaker. Over to you, Jessica.
Okay. Thank you, Krishna, for that. Welcome, everybody, to this afternoon's CALAX seminar. My name is Jessica Liu, and I'm an associate professor of chemistry at Biola University. It is my privilege to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Cristal Hill, assistant professor at University of Southern California's Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. Dr. Hill grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, with ambitions in veterinary medicine, but a strong interest in endocrine diseases developed while working at a local veterinary clinic during high school. She earned her PhD in molecular biology from Southern Illinois University School of Medicine in 2016, focusing on the biology of aging under the mentorship of Dr. Andre Bartke. Her Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in Animal Sciences were from Tuskegee University under the mentorship of Dr. Michelle Corley, with her master's research centered on inflammatory responses of cardiovascular disease during high-fat feeding in poultry models. Currently, Dr. Hill's research centers on the unique effects of dietary protein on adipose tissue function, investigating how protein restriction can influence optimal health and lifespan. Her work aims to uncover adaptive responses in adipose tissue and their broader implications for metabolic and endocrine health during aging. Before joining USC, Dr. Hill was a postdoctoral fellow at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center in Louisiana, where she was recognized as the 2022 Outstanding Postdoc of the Year. In 2021, she received the Dr. Norman Orentreich Award for a Young Investigator in Aging. Most recently, Dr. Hill was honored with the Nathan Schock New Investigator Award by the Gerontology Society of America. Dr. Hill's research focuses on how dietary interventions influence cellular signaling pathways affecting health and aging. Beyond her research, Dr. Hill mentors and inspires young individuals to pursue careers in science, aiming to cultivate the next generation of innovators in aging research. At USC, Dr. Hill collaborates with multidisciplinary faculty members to explore the intersection of nutrition, genetics, and aging, contributing to the school's mission of promoting healthy aging for diverse populations. The title of Dr. Hill's presentation today is Longevity on Your Plate, the Role of Diet in Aging and Healthspan. Let us welcome Professor Cristal Hill.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. First, thank you to the Southern California section of the ACS for the invitation to talk. At first, when you first reached out, I was kind of considering or wondering the Chemistry Society, which I understand the interconnection, but I was really trying to get the broader, bigger picture where my work could fit into this. And so I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of the understandings about diet and aging with you and your membership. So my talk is focused on longevity on your plate. What does that mean, actually? We like to look at this from the role of diet and aging and health span. All right. And so today I'm going to give you a couple of flavors of broad topics along with some of the biological mechanisms that regulate diet interactions. And so first we're going to look at this from the optimal aging. Like, are we really priming yourself for graceful aging? I'll talk a little bit about chronological versus biological. lifespan and health expenditure, and then traditional diet compositions. Definitely are going to talk about these established dietary interventions that benefit health span. There are 4 well-established: calorie restriction being the gold standard, fasting, ketogenic diet, and a little bit about the work that I do in protein restriction or dietary protein content. What are some fad diets that we should consider when we're watching media or reading on the internet or just on social media? And then some popular diets. Really, I just focus on the Blue Zone diet, as they do touch point with different other diets that I may bring up during the discussion. So let's start here. As a population, are we mindful, or are we considering how we age daily? And so what do I mean by that? Do we do things to slow down our actual biological age? And so I just like to list some tips here, but you can kind of tell what they are. But we should always visit our doctor, try to get the 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, keep a positive mindset, stay connected to your loved ones, learn something new. And this is one of my personal favorites, number 8, do what you love to do. But on top of those lists is get regular exercise, be active, and eat a balanced, healthy diet. And so why do we want to do that, right? And so we know how we age. We either age by number or we age biologically, which is on the inside. And so the chronological age is just the number of years that you've been alive, that you live from birth, right? And so what is biological aging? That refers to how old your cells and your tissues are based within the physiological evidence. And that means things like observations such as for diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, or even decline within neurocognition. And so when we consider what really is a factor for biological aging, we can think of the terms of cellular damage, or another term, senescence. And so there are these external factors that may lead to these insults of biological aging. Again, lifestyle is very important, being active or not active. Nutrition, these are calorie-dense diets versus nutrient-dense. Your genes, genetic risk, cellular stress, these are most things, your genes you cannot change. Mental stress, smoking, and living in certain environments. Is it walkable? Is it a food desert? What kind of food is available to you, as well as microbes, right? And so just to kind of zone in or zoom in onto this graph here, what this shows is biological age by chronological age. And so biological age, we think to increase through this linear relationship, that it just increases. But there are things such as these external factors could reduce this biological age or increase this biological age that aligns with chronological age. And so why is aging important? Why do we really care about it? So if you can kind of just take from this graph here, countries spend less money, such as like Japan, or I just use terms like Asia and European countries, they use less money or spend less money, and they age longer. However, when you look at the United States, we spend more money, but we're not doing as great as Asia and Europe. Even countries within our own regions, Canada and Costa Rica and Mexico, they actually spend less, and they age at a better rate than we do. But why is this important? So as you age, you have an increase for risk factors for heart disease, cancer, stroke, pneumonia, diabetes, kidney disease, and even neurocognitive decline. And so other factors that contribute to this is also obesity. And while BMI is not the best measurement that we have, or BMI varies within populations, there's been studies showing that the increase in BMI is also related to cardiovascular disease, or what they call metabolic syndromes, gallbladder, as well as diabetes. And so together, aging and obesity are prominent risk factors for most metabolic and neurodegenerative diseases. And so since we're talking about diet, what is really balanced diet? We hear this term a lot. So balanced diets refer to traditional diets. And so these traditional diets have been serving human civilization for decades, from the ancient period to ongoing modern era, so today. And what does that really mean for health? It supports the immune system, your circulatory system, brain function, and other several metabolic functions in the human body. And so earlier lifestyles of humans, they really focused on growing their own vegetables and their own crops, hunting animals if that was the choice, and their consumption of how much food they actually intake. And this traditional diet is quite diverse, or it has varied ingredients or nutrients as it's related to different cultures. And nearly all the traditional diets are centered on just fruits, vegetables, whole grains, pulses, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, and other plant foods. And so that is really, when you consider or you hear people say you should eat a balanced diet, think more of a traditional diet. Everything that was grown on their own, or they went into hunt for themselves, think of it in those terms. But there are different flavors of that traditional diet now. And so I'm going to really go through 4 different categories, and I'm going to split them up and talk about some of the research that has been used to, that these diets have been used in to talk about the health benefits, more so on the biological changes that happen through health span as well as age. And so I mentioned that calorie restriction is the golden standard. It's a great diet. It's been known to improve many health outcomes, reduce metabolic syndromes, or improve metabolic health. But it's hard, and a lot of people can't do it. But just for the description, it's dietary reduction by 15 to 40% of the caloric intake, and this is without malnutrition. So that is another factor that may happen during calorie restriction, is that you miss some of the nutrients. So you have to be thoughtful of what nutrients are you consuming while you're doing calorie restriction. Another one is fasting. I'll go through these kind of briefly so I can get through the content. Fasting involves time-restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, as well as periodic fasting. And so these come in flavors as well, 24 hours, so you have days. Periodic may mean 1 to 2 days of fasting. And time-restricted is really within the day, the 24-hour window. And then ketogenic diet, I think most people have heard about this one. It's really just a high-fat, low-carb diet. There you go. High-fat, low-carb diet. And they all have these same benefits. And even I go ahead and bring up reducing dietary protein, amino acids, which in my lab, we study dietary protein restriction. And so this restricts the protein intake to about 4 to 8% of the calories intake, when a normal diet consists of 20 to 50 grams of protein that day. And so just to give you this, this overview, as all of these diets are sitting here on this chart, they've been shown to improve health. And with this improvement in health, then you have likely this improvement or extension of lifespan. And what's really great about understanding these diets is that we kind of get to take this to the cellular and molecular level. And I won't go too deep into this, but if you can kind of just hone into this area called pro-aging effects, as an investigator, we're mostly concerned about these areas here. And so these intracellular signals, how do they respond to nutrients? Circulating fats or glucose levels or even amino acids. And so we're interested in how we can use diets or nutrients to alter these biological factors that may contribute to some of the age-related diseases, as I mentioned earlier, such as insulin resistance or increasing in body fat. How does the diet send a signal to the cell or within the cell to alter it, to adapt to a nutrient, to make you more healthier? That's the key. And so I'm going to go through all of those diets with some research, some evidence-based studies to kind of show you that this is nothing really new, but the molecular targets are new and quite interesting. So let's just dive into it here. Calorie restriction, reducing dietary calorie intake by a significant amount. This is normally like 20 to 50% while still consuming all of the necessary nutrients. Again, it improves metabolic health. It reduces type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, as well as the onset of neurodegenerative diseases such as AD or PD-related illnesses. And some studies in animals or in rodents or animals have shown that CR can extend lifespan and delay this onset of these age-related illnesses. It's also been shown to improve mental and emotional health. So these are some of the early studies by McKay and Carwell. And so these studies were conducted around 1930, in the 1930s at Cornell University. And so up top, these are actually siblings, two rats that were born together and housed together for about over 2 years. And as you can see here, one was actually calorie restricted, separated, was calorie restricted over that time. And this is actually the ad libitum mouse that was able to consume all the calories that they wanted all the time, while this rat, was calorie restricted. This also holds true for rodent models that are known to be long-lived. These are Ames dwarf mice. And so these mice have a spontaneous mutation inside their pituitary. And so from that, they do not produce growth hormone. And so even somatic mutations or mutations that happen naturally, if these animals are deficient, they live long. And so even when you put these animals on a calorie restricted diet, they live even longer. And so let's just kind of walk through this data set here. These are wild type animals fed ad libitum whenever they like, no restriction. These are wild type animals with a calorie restricted diet, they live longer. Ames dwarf mice live twice as long as control animals, about 40 to 50%, 40 to 60% than control littermates. And so when you subject them to a calorie restriction or restricted feeding, they extend their lifespan. And so there's this intersection of trying to understand how nutrients impact growth, and does that growth have an impact on lifespan? And so as you can see here, it does. This has also been linked to non-human primates. This is one of the monkey studies showing that if you calorie restrict monkeys here, rhesus monkeys, this is actually the CR monkey compared to the ad libitum monkey. And you can see that he's still quite hairy and still beautiful fur and very healthy looking compared to the restricted, to the ad libitum monkey. And so this also translates to humans, and we're talking about these biological pathways and how, again, how diet intersects or interacts with these pathways. And so just in a population that have dwarfism, these individuals actually have a deficiency within their growth hormone receptor. They create less growth hormone, so they have less free binding IGF-1 and also low levels of insulin. And these individuals live longer. And so if you think of this and kind of switch this over to what happens in an individual that does not have this growth hormone deficiency, and how does diet interact with those pathways, you see that there's just an increase in insulin and IGF-1. And within these two pathways, they have been related to cardiovascular diseases as well as cancer and diabetes. And so there's that interaction, again, trying to understand how does nutrients impact these intracellular pathways, and how can we target those in order to help individuals live longer or with a healthier lifespan. And so this has also been translated within the centenarians. These are individuals that live over 100 years. And so just like, not just like, but comparable, these individuals have low levels of IGF-1 because they have a mutation within their IGF-1 receptor. So while IGF-1 can naturally bind to the receptor and transmit this intracellular pathway or signal, these individuals have a blockage on that receptor, which allows for them to have their free IGF-1 to be sequestered by binding proteins, and that inhibits that signal. So they age much slower than others. This has also been extended to a huge study funded by NIH and NIA. And so this is the Caloric study. And so the Caloric study was a 2-year randomized controlled trial of human calorie restriction. It has many sites, Pennington Biomedical Research Center being one of them, Duke, St. Louis, as well as Tufts and Boston and St. Louis. And so this study, there's a new phase of this study called the Caloric 2 trial. And so just to give you not a lot, but a couple of the research that's come out of that is showing that calorie restriction, comparing that with exercise, how does that really impact coronary heart disease and the risk factors? How does it alter liver lipids and markers of NASH or NFLAD? Also showing how calorie restriction on rest and metabolic state, how does it alter your basal metabolism? So there's more than just these few that I listed here, but just to know that calorie restriction has been being studied for a while, and how we are taking or using this particular diet to leverage these biological or intracellular changes for population is quite exciting and very important for us to have a healthier lifespan. So fasting. Most individuals like to do fasting these days. There's 3 flavors to this. There's time-restricted feeding, there's intermittent fasting, and there's periodic fasting. And so really fasting is just a general act of sustaining from food or drink for a period of time. It's been known to improve insulin sensitivity, as well as improve blood pressure, or reduce blood pressure and reduce body fat. It can also initiate cellular repair processes such as autophagy, which can digest or remove old proteins from cells. And so I'm just going to kind of go through the schedules here. So you have to pick your schedule when you think of fasting, which is going to be more conducive to your daily lifestyle. So you have full day fasting. And so this is the first one is eat, stop, eat. And so on day 1, you eat normally. Day 2, you have a 24-hour fast. And then day 3 and 4, you may eat normally again, then another fast, and then eat normally. So you continue with this cycle because you're really just reducing the amount of calories that you take in. If you consider how many calories you take in per week or so, this is all a alter or a change in the paradigm from calorie restriction. You have alternate day fasting. A lot of individuals will do this one. Day 1, you eat normally. Day 2, 24-hour fast, that's it. And then some individuals may eat a few hundred calories, mainly just to make sure that they're getting their micronutrients. And if they need to get macronutrients, they would do so, like their proteins and their carbs and certain fats or so. But you eat or you fast, or you fast for 24 hours, or you eat just a very, very small amount. And this is alternate days, right? So you eat, you fast, or you eat a little bit, then you eat again, you fast, you eat a little bit, and then you eat normally. Then there's the 5-2 diet. You eat normally. And so within the week, you eat 2 days and you fast for 5 days. That's the ideal here. And so some individuals or women or men may consume different amount of calories. I would also say if you're going to do this, this is also projected towards your lifestyle. So if you're going to do this and you're working out, you may consume more calories on the days that you that you're doing this fast, but while you're exercising. So you eat these 2 days, you eat 5 days and you fast for 2 days. And so while a lot of people try to do these, I think what I found, or just listening to others, is that people like to do this fasting every day, right? And it's quite simple and a little bit more easier because you sleep most of the time, and then you can get up the next morning, and most individuals will have like I drink black coffee, so I use myself. Black coffee, and you can eat at 10 to 12 is your first meal, and then you stop, and then you will eat again by 4 to 8 p.m. So you eat within the window of that day. This is another popular one. It's the 16-8. This is the one that I think a lot of people likely do the 16-8, where their first meal is at lunch. And then their last meal is by 8 o'clock at night. And so they fast, they're sleeping between this time, and then it's every day. And this has been shown to also reduce insulin levels, or reduce the insulin spike when you eat a meal. So it's been quite effective. A lot of people like this particular paradigm here. And so I keep moving along through the types of diet. We're next with the ketogenic diet. This diet can lead to rapid weight loss due to reduced calorie intake from carbs, and it also has been shown to increase fat burning. This diet can also help lower blood sugar levels in people with type 2 diabetes, and not just people with type 2 diabetes. It also works in individuals that don't have diabetes. And so it's also been shown to be effective in reducing seizures in some people with epilepsy, not all. Actually, this was why this diet was first discovered, was to assist that population that were having epileptic seizures. And so what is it? It became quite popular. It's always been known since for epilepsy, but it became popular around 2018, 19. It was very popular. A lot of people were talking about ketogenic diet. You could not walk in the grocery store without seeing any label saying keto friendly or such. And so what it typically does is reduce the total amount of carbohydrates that you consume. Most times it's less than 50 grams a day. The example I have here is that it's the amount of carbs you find in a medium plain bagel. And so it can also be as low as 20 grams a day. And so individuals have been able to kind of make this diet a little bit more sustainable, because it also has foods that are more palatable to most individuals. But there's also some bad or incorrect ways to do ketogenic diet. So you have to be cautious of that. And so generally, individuals on this particular paradigm will consume about 70 to 80% of fat. And this mostly is, you would think, unsaturated, poly and monounsaturated fats. From their total calories, about 5 to 10 of carbohydrates, and protein is varying, and so 10 to 20%. And so there are also some different flavors for ketogenic diet. So you have targeted ketogenic, and this is comparable to the standard ketogenic diet, but it allows for more carbohydrates during exercise. So individuals that may be lifting a lot of weight, or may be running for a long distance, may need to have a little bit more carbohydrates to fuel those particular activities. So this type or variation of a ketogenic diet will allow them to do that. You have cyclinal-ketogenic, and so this involves alternating between ketogenic days and days with higher carb intake. So it's almost like intermittent or alternate day feeding, with ketogenic for one day, and then one day you have a little bit more carb than you did on your KD day. And then lastly, there's a high protein ketogenic diet, And this is also known as the modified Atkins diet. And this one particularly emphasizes a little bit more protein in the diet. It limits the fat, but not to the point where you're equal with how much carb. You still have a very low amount of carbs within this diet, but it allows for you to consume more protein. And so since I'm an investigator, I like to understand, why do these things do this? You know, the highlight for most is that, oh, I lost weight, or, oh, I feel better. But I'm always interested in the why. What did it do on the inside, right? Meaning, what did it do to the cell? And I always think that's quite interesting, that we can use diet to make a cell, or a cell can adapt to different nutrients. I always thought that was always my curious cookie. I always wanted to know why. And so this is a very busy slide. It's just to give you some insight to some of the cellular changes or the adaptations that are being induced under these types of high fat, low glucose diet. So we just look at Alzheimer's disease. There's been studies to show that tau, amyloid beta and tau have been reduced. Acetyl-CoA is reduced and glutamate is up. There's also been shown some improvements in Parkinson's disease, where you have dopaminergic neurodegeneration is reduced. Also, some neuroinflammation is reduced by markers like interleukin-1b, IL-6, TNF-alpha. There's also some apoptosis is increased. So to get rid of some of that, those cellular insults within the brain, just to kind of give you some of that insight, not to go so deep into this figure here, but just knowing that these diets, and by the way, ketone bodies are actually changing the response of these other molecular insults within these diseases. So that was brain, and how does this work on metabolic health as a whole, which is something I'm always interested in. So you see that the ketone diet, or the ketogenic diet, reduces the carbohydrates. One of my favorites here, increases FGF21. It also has an impact on your glucose transporters. This is how glucose gets into the cell. So I didn't talk about this, but this is after insulin binds to the receptor, which the best way I can relate this is that insulin is a key to open the door of the cell so glucose can get into the cell here. And so this diet overall reduces inflammation, increases fullness from hormones, increases your energy expenditure, reduces oxidative stress, and overall just has some benefits on many different organs within their own function, for like type 2 diabetes on the pancreas, or reduces insulin, reduces non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and also some implication for polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so we come to dietary protein restriction, which is something that I study in my lab. And so while this is sometimes met with opposition, that why would you do that? And so let's just kind of go through it. What is dietary protein restriction? It's actually just consuming less protein than the recommended amount. It is not taking protein completely out of the diet. It is a reduction of the intake. So when we say restrict, we just restrict how much you're consuming. As a strategy that it may offer benefits for certain conditions, particularly CKD. It's been shown to potentially be beneficial for metabolic health and lifespan. However, it is very crucial to ensure that you have adequate overall nutrition and consult with a healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, but particularly this change, because you need amino acids and they're non-essential that you have to consume. So you definitely want to make sure you do not take all the protein out of your diet, whether it comes from meat or whether it comes from vegetables. Do not remove all the protein out of your diet. And again, talk to a healthcare professional. So protein restriction may trigger the release of this hormone called FGF21. And so this hormone is known to play a role in metabolic processes and contribute to the benefits of this diet as a whole. So it's like you're doing protein restriction or you're reducing your protein intake, but you're getting a benefit from this metabolic hormone. And so again, the optimal level of protein restriction, this is your total intake, varies depending on individual needs. Again, see a health care professional if you consider doing this or any of the diets. So I'll tell you a little bit about dietary protein restriction. First, it's not new either. It was first studied in 1931. And so building onto this, there's been many different insights to trying to understand how does just amino acids play a role in metabolic health as well as lifespan. And so here, one of my interesting one is using protein and amino acid restriction on aging and disease. This is from yeast to humans. This is kind of in this chart here. And so you can see from simple to more complex organisms that low protein diets have been shown to increase health span across the board and reduce or increase lifespan and reduce age-related disease. For humans, it's been shown to increase health span as well as reduce age-related disease, but we don't have the longevity data. And so therefore we just, try to understand or equate how improvements in health span may lead to improvements in lifespan or living longer with better health span. And so one of the first studies that was shown or discussed or demonstrated how low protein diet will actually work in humans. This was work at the Longo lab here. And this was showing that low protein diet intake is associated with major reductions in IGF-1. Again, trying to understand how these macronutrients have a role on the cell and what does that change contribute into health span and lifespan. Also, it was shown that it reduces the risk of cancer in individuals that were 65 and younger, but not older population. So this really, this report here put on the, was really important for us to understand when do we implement these diets. That's a big question in the biogerontological field these days is when do we get the most of diets or any type of health benefiting intervention, whether it's diet or exercise. Again, even just separating methionine out of the total protein has been shown to extend lifespan. So some great outcomes of trying to tease apart these diets and looking at the cell changes that contribute to these beneficial outcomes. And so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the work from the protein restriction reports. And so I always like to use this because I'm an animal scientist by training first. And so animals have always been interesting to me. And if you watch an animal, you can always tell how the day is going to go. My mom they just had a storm in Alabama and she was saying the dog was downstairs and I was like, you need to follow her. So let me just get back into it. So what are we trying to understand about these diets is, if they're having this role on cellular changes, could that actually transmit to the brain and tell you how to consume a certain macronutrient, or what is it that your body peripheral is telling your brain to go and digest? And so I'll use the bears here. Bears normally, they forage or they graze for berries or grass or honey, but at times they may need or feel that they have to consume protein. And this could be for reasons, for reproductive reasons, evolutionary, conserved for reproduction. But just think that these animals, they have to adapt on this large nutritional landscape. And so do they feel moments that they need to consume more protein or even carbs or even fats? And so what is it that makes them drive to do certain activities to equate or equal out their nutritional needs? And I guess we can kind of understand that from just established work that the brain responds to peripheral hormones, of that being very well discussed and established is leptin and insulin. Leptin is released from adipocytes that works within the hypothalamus, signals back to the stomach for kind of in pain, and you will no longer consume food. So these two hormones are well established to regulate food intake, energy expenditure, as well as reproduction, growth, and metabolism. And so around 2016, it was shown that FGF21 is an endocrine signal of protein restriction. And I don't have the FGF21 slides, I'll tell you what it is. It's a hormone that's released from the liver. Mostly it's released from everywhere, but abundantly with synthesized and secreted from the liver. And when you feed an animal a low protein diet, or a mouse in this figure here, they have a robust increase of FGF21 as early as day 4, and this is consistent out to day 14. You also can test if this is required, or this hormone is required to do to be increased under these conditions of a low protein diet by using animals that are deficient within this hormone. And so as you can see here, this is a wild type animal fed a low protein diet, has a reduction in body weight gain, so they lose weight. And animals that are deficient for FGF21 signaling, these responses on reductions in body weight are blunted or lost. And so we also recently showed that FGF21 was required during prolonged feeding to increase or extend lifespan in animals. So this is quite still new and interesting. And so now we're trying to tease apart how the diet works on other organs, as well as how they may be distant from this signaling pathway. So we still got a lot of work to do. Just another overall take on protein restriction is that within protein restriction, there has to be some equaling, or you have to increase other macronutrients. And so this ratio of how much protein to carb, because fat is constant, and I didn't say, but protein restriction allows for you to consume isocaloric diet, so you don't have to do a reduction in calories consumed. So there's no CR with protein restriction. But if you just kind of take a look at this graphic here, so these are the nutritional interventions. So you have calorie restriction, it reduces the energy intake. It also reduces energy expenditure and your respiratory rate. However, you do get the improvements in metabolic health, such as glucose metabolism and insulin and glucagon secretion. Blood lipids are actually reduced, and you have a lower risk for type 2 diabetes, as likely evaluated or measured, equated by HOMA. But with ad libitum low protein diet, you get an increase in energy intake, which is kind of counterintuitive because you're thinking that you're losing all this weight, but I'm eating more. You have an increase in energy expenditure, and you have an increase in your respiratory rate. And so this is really for within mice, this is measured by, are they using carbs or fat as a substrate? And so they have an increase. And so you still get this balance here, or this improvement with metabolic health during low protein diet as compared to calorie restriction. And so we'll kind of come to the stop, right? We went over calorie restriction. We've went over fasting, ketogenic diets and protein restriction with a little bit of the metabolic benefits, in which they all kind of work on these cellular components to improve metabolic health. But I think it's really important that we recognize and acknowledge when this happens, especially within media or social media, because that's where we mostly are these days, on our phone, catching information. And if you really pay attention to like your algorithm, if you click on one, they start to come up in like every other scroll or so. Every 2 ads that come up is dealing with whatever you clicked on before. So if you're looking at diets, they're going to start to feed into your algorithms. And so we have to be really careful that we don't get attached or swooped by the fad diets. And so the fad diet is a popular diet. It's generally short for short term. You can compare them to like fashion. They don't have a standard scientific daily recommendation. And so you have to really be careful about those. These were likely back in the day about the Domino sugar diet. I couldn't believe that one. The sexy pineapple diet. I think I did hear about the ice cream diet when I was younger. But they often lead to unreasonable claims that are like the quick fix, right? Fast weight loss or health improvements, but you can't sustain this forever. You can't do an ice cream diet for your whole life. It's just not sustainable. There are also others that kind of get you. It's like, take this vitamin, do this, do that, or today's drink. So just, putting this out here to be cautious and be aware when you see these type of ads within media or in the news or something like that. Again, they can be bad for your health, right? Because there's no research proving the fad diets are safe in the long term. They have a strong, and also if you have this real strong desire to improve health or lose weight, which mostly is not the improve health part, it is mostly the lose weight all the time. I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. It often leads people to do these quick fad diets. So just be cautious of that, whatever you decide to do, that is a lifestyle change, whatever it is, right? If you decide to do CR, or if you decide to do ketogenic or some type of fasting, or even protein restriction, just make sure that it's sustainable for a long term. And another problem with a fad diet is they may lead to yo-yo dieting. So this is when people may start the diet, then they have restriction. And during restriction, you feel deprived and tempted. And because you're deprived and you're tempted, you have cravings. And then you give in. And then most times when you give in, there's guilt, leads to low self-esteem and poor confidence. And I'm just saying, you don't have to be that way. Make it sustainable for you. Everybody is not the same. So find what works for you. That's always my take home when talking about diets. Do what's best for you. And so with this yo-yo dieting, and there's actually been studies about this as well, it increases the risk for eating disorders. It can create malnutrition, impair quality of life and well-being, again, bone diseases. Oh, that's many questions. Anemia, metabolic abnormalities, hormone deficiencies, and heart problems. And so I'll do the conclusion and then I'll jump on the questions, and I'll try to answer the questions before I get to the blue zones. So conclusions about the diets as a whole. While there's evidence-based research on diet and macronutrients, again, focus on balanced approach that prioritizes whole foods and unprocessed foods, right? You also want to include a variety of nutrients that align with your individual needs and preferences rather than restrictive or fad diets. I have my own 3 C's. Always consult a healthcare professional or a registered dietitian. Consume mostly vegetables, whole grains, fruits, lean proteins, and healthy fats. Avocados are great. Consider your lifestyle and not quick fixes. So I'll take a break. We only have 10 minutes and I want to answer the questions and I don't know if I'm gonna get through the blue zones that fast. Okay, so let me kind of go through some of the questions. Okay. Wait, let's do this. Walnuts are part of a diet that includes tryptophan amino acid. How does this improve health of neurotransmitters? Great question. It is also the start of serotonin. And so that is important for depression and emotional health. So great question. Does calorie restriction make the human body digest healthy muscles for protein? It could and it can't. So let's remember that you have to eat the amount of protein that your body needs. There are a lot of vegetarian athletes, if you think about that, and they are quite efficient on how many or how much macronutrients they consume daily. And even if they are vegetarians or vegans, they get their protein needs from other sources. So you always have to make sure that you're consuming the amount of protein that your body needs. Do we know what the mechanism, do we know what is the mechanism for how ketogenic diet treats epilepsy? I would think it's more so the ketone bodies working within that signaling pathway. Ketogenic diets activate. Oh, okay. The peroxisome receptors, right. Okay, so is the idea of protein restriction increases the production of, this is FGF21, which in turn activates the brain signaling of eating less. Okay, so FGF21 actually works within the brain, and you don't eat less, you actually eat more. And so we're working on pulling those or teasing that pathway apart at which what makes FGF21 turn on a certain signal that allows for you to continue to lose weight, but you increase the food intake. How does it compare to GLP-1 based medications like Ozempic? It's comparable, and we're actually looking at that right now. So get back there, get back with us pretty soon. I imagine GLP-1 and just perform. They do perform different mechanisms. So again, we're teasing those apart so we can have a targetable approach here. Should you count macros when counting calories to lose weight? You should count the macros when you're doing calorie restriction so you don't create any malnutrition. And so at the end of the day, you always want to make sure that you're consuming what your body needs. If you don't really understand how your body is going to respond to certain diets, I always suggest to speak to a registered dietitian or like your doctor for someone to kind of help you with that, to do the calculations on how much food you may need to intake or restrict in order for you to meet your weight goals. Okay, I think that is it. Okay, I'm gonna try to jump back into the talk. Okay, is it okay if I keep going? We're 5 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right, great. Let's see if I can get it to go. Okay, so this is the last section. I wanted to talk about the blue zones because the blue zones actually are different regions that incorporate most of the type of diets that we hear, like the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet. You can kind of use the blue zones as like a blueprint or fingerprint of how those diets actually came about and how they may benefit you if you choose one of those, right? And so I also like to show that, this is kind of new from Dan Buettner, as far as the power nine. You know, you have your diet, but what's important, is the diet the only thing important? No. So being able to move and have like the right outlook, and then you eat wisely and you connect with your loved ones or your family. And what does that mean with connecting, belonging, loved ones first? Is this the right tribe for me? Are these the right friends? What's my 80% rule when I eat? Plant, or do I have wine at 5? Like, what is the, and what does eating wisely look like for me? Move naturally. Do I sit all day, or do I go for a walk? Or when I get up in the morning, do I do 50 jumping jacks before I even have my first cup of coffee? Things like that. The right outlook. What is my purpose in life, and how do I pull away when things become too much? All of those we have to consider when we're trying to incorporate, if we must, the diet change. Because at times when you're super stressed, these diets may not work for individuals. When you are stressed out, your body won't respond to lose weight when it's stressed, because it's going to hold on to the time if it thinks it's in famine or starvation. And so what do the people in the blue zones eat? They have a diet full of whole plants. And so again, these are just geographic regions around the world with these individuals within these locations. They live exceptionally long and they have very healthy lives. And so they eat about a 95% plant-based diet. Most groups, they're not strict vegetarians at all, but they do eat low amounts of protein or meat. And they're also close knit. So there's something to think about. The support system or the friends and the family that you have around also contribute to this overall well-being scope. And so just some of the food guidelines, and I put the links here, and you can, when I share the slides, you can go and explore at your free time. But just to kind of give an overview of what these individuals do. So daily, they have nuts, right? About 1 to 2 handfuls a day. They drink mostly water, 7 glasses a day, coffee, tea, and wine in moderation. Have a dose of beans. They go wholly whole, single ingredient, raw, cooked, ground, fermented, not highly processed at all. Most of them consume, again, 95 to 100% plant-based. Weekly, they go easy on the fish. So not too much fish, maybe 3 times a week, not a lot of eggs. And they really slash sugar to about 28 grams, and there's 7 teaspoons of added sugar a day. I know I used to teach students or kids when I was in grad school, and the daily recommendation at the time was 40 grams a day. And so we would tell them to measure out 10 teaspoons. And I would say, well, go ahead and eat that. And they would say, no. And I'm like, well, if you think about it, a beverage or a carbonated drink has about 65 grams of sugar. And that's just in the consumption of the carbonated beverage itself. So kind of think about it in those ways of how much sugar or additional sugars we're adding just by consumption of liquids. These individuals monthly, they reduce their dairy intake, and they also refrain from eating a lot of meat. And so I kind of just went over this. They consume vegetables, legumes, and whole grains and nuts. And so all of these are rich in fiber as well as some healthy carbohydrates. So again, this goes back to that, what's a balanced diet? These are mostly of the traditional diet contents here. And so I'm gonna kind of go through them. There are currently 5 blue zones and 1 right here in Loma Linda. These are a group of 7 day Adventists. They're a very religious group. They're strict vegetarians, and they do live in a tight-knit community. They live on an average of 10 years longer compared to the US population as a whole. Nicoya, Costa Rica, they have a diet of homemade corn tortillas, black beans, white rice, a lot of yams, squash, papaya, bananas. They eat meat, fish, poultry. It's still very low in the amount of meat that they consume in their daily diet. Individuals in this area, they perform physical jobs into old age and have a sense of life purpose. So knowing what your purpose is as you are having this lifestyle, that's you're focused on your diet, but what is your purpose in life here? And then also Sardinia, Italy. This region is home to the oldest person, it was to the oldest person in the world. They live in mountain regions and they typically work on farms and drink lots of red wine. They also have a very vegetarian-based diet as well. Akara, Greece. Okay, there we go. This is where most of the Mediterranean-rich diet was stemmed from. These individuals consume olive oil, red wine, some fish, and homegrown vegetables. And Okinawa, Japan, includes a lot of soy-based foods. They also consume a lot of sweet potatoes. And their activity is mostly Tai Chi, which is a meditative form of exercise. So again, you're active in how you belong. And, even with Tai Chi, you may find your purpose as you're going through the motions of the activity. What are you put here to give back or to do, right? Just not diet and just not exercise, the whole package here. Doing one and not considering the other factors, you won't see the benefits, right? So you have to always remember, make time for understanding and learning your purpose. And not just the blue zone. So they also have added a new project where these places may not be where they have exceptional lifespan, but they are improving their health span. And so most of these are beach towns. There's one here in Fort Worth, Texas, that's added to the project. And so I think this is a growing interest in the US because our lifespan is not increasing, but our cost in healthcare is. And so how can we make our communities a little bit more better and safer for us to have these improvements, holistically? Walking 30 minutes a day, 40 minutes a day releases dopamine in the brain, right? And so having those options while you're aging is quite important. And so that brings me to, and just maybe being happy is a key, right? If you're happy and you're adapted to this new diet lifestyle, maybe that's the key right there. And so we can kind of look at Jean Clement. She was the oldest woman that lived to 122 years. And what she would say, or what she was known for, was that she would have olive oil. She would eat it and also put it on her skin. She had a active lifestyle where she learned how to do bike. She rode a bike until she was 100, and she took up a fencing at age 85. And she just had this I guess, aura of serenity, just being serene, right? And so, we all going to have happiness and we all going to have troubles, but finding your way to balance that along with your diet and your exercise is really important. And so I will stop here. And if there are any more questions in the chat, I'd be glad to take them. If we don't have any, or you don't have any at this time, you can email me. And I'm happy to talk because I know I went over the time limit.
Right.
There's 2 student questions in the
Okay.
chat.
Let me,
Thank you.
okay. Student Italy. Would a sugar diet be considered healthy? A sugar diet, not a full sugar diet. When we say sugar diet, we have to know like carbohydrates wise, right? And so we want to be careful how we just use the term sugar, because sugars are carbohydrates and there are different types of carbohydrates. And so we just really want to consider what is it that we're consuming. The sugar. So the next question, if so, then what would possibly increase clarity in the brain? Sugar by itself, you can't do that, right? You want to be careful not to consume that. Does sugar or carbohydrates possibly make you gain more weight? It is really good to have a little bit of avocado every day due to its fibers and potassium. Yeah, and magnesium too. Don't forget that one. But the sugars or carbs possibly gain. It's not that they cause you to gain more weight. We're thinking about the implications that sugars or overload of glucose has on your pancreas as a whole. And so overloading the system with glucose could likely cause the pancreas to increase in its workload. And that could create problems as where your body does not actively use that energy. You're welcome. Okay, so then one last question. Could you clarify what you said about the benefits of eating less protein? What is the harm of eating too much protein? I think people are trying to buck up. Good question. So the benefits, and when we're thinking about these benefits, we're thinking about them as how the liver responds to lesser amino acids, and they release this beneficial hormone. Now, I briefly spoke about FGF21, but FGF21 is known to reduce blood glucose levels as well as increase body fat loss. And so the harm of eating too much protein without using that protein, it could also damage your cells on this whole, remember I spoke about this insulin, this lock and key method of how insulin binds to the receptor to allow glucose into the cell. You can damage that with too much nutrients, not just proteins, but any macronutrient could cause that to happen. If you're trying to bulk up, you definitely will use those proteins for muscle building. So it shouldn't be a problem as long as you use them. We're mostly thinking about individuals that may be sedentary and just not using these nutrients. And so we're trying to understand what are the targets that we could further study during these different type of diet interventions that would allow us to give insight on how to be a little bit more healthy or a lot more healthy, so we can live longer without the extra cost. And I think that was the last question.
So if there are no more questions, it is my present duty to thank very much Cristal
Oh, you're welcome.
for a very, very scintillating seminar. And I think it is very educational to adults as well as to the younger generation as well. And I also thank Veronica Yaramilo and our administrative staff for facilitating the Zoom seminar. And last but not the least, to all the audiences who have listened to it and enjoyed Cristal's seminar.
Thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me.
Thank
Have
you.
a good afternoon, everyone. Or
Bye.
evening. Bye-bye.